Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, bro?
Oh, doing really well, Yariv. Happy to be back for another episode. Obviously, the news is kind of slowing a little bit in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the NHL. I wouldn't say like league wide there's no news because there is some news, but in terms of Flyers news, it's been a little bit slow. So this is probably an episode, I think probably our first episode this offseason where we've really had to scrape together a topic list, surprisingly enough. So we
Yeah,
we made it almost to the beginning of September without it, being this dead. So I'd
yeah.
say that's a pretty good success, right?
Especially in off season with like no acquisitions,
hmm
the amount of news that there's been, like just surrounding the team. Not all good news, and obviously there's still speculation. And we don't have Kolosov here on the list, but we can speculate on that too. We're gonna do like a prospect breakdown in the second half of the show. But it's probably gonna be one of our shorter shows today. Also, you're going on vacation, so we got a time crunch here, people. It is what it is.
That's okay. We've been giving all the Flyers fans and all the listeners like 2 hour pods all summer, so
Yeah.
we've been
And
spoiling you guys.
yeah. All right, let's get right into it. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube to get notified on when our episodes come out, the video versions. Again, the best way to support us is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So if you're listening and you have not done that so far, please do so. It's a humongous help to us. Also, a like is also helpful as well. If you are a regular listener and you're not liking our videos, I hope that you like them. But if you do like them, please give us a like. That also helps get our videos exposed and recommended to other viewers. And also follow us on iTunes and Spotify for the audio version. Hit the follow button on either one of those to follow us on there as well. Also, a great way to support our show. I would argue that the video is a little bit better just because we do some visuals every now and then. But again, audio is available, and unless I screw up, which has happened periodically, it should be out as soon as the video version is out. But I won't screw up tonight, and then watch. I probably will. Okay. And then a shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's at 4th and South. They are one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. They reopened back in May, so make sure to go support them. They were out of commission for almost 2 years. Now they're back in full force with a remodel. So make sure to go check out Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Also, shout out to Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. Have them look at your claims and be your protector against the insurance companies and not getting what you want. So, again, that's Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also, just want to give a brief shout out to our new partner, Sports Spider. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, sportspider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date as possible on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL just in general, hit the link in the description and check out sportspider.com. Again, they are our partners. Our stuff is prioritized to the top of their site when it comes out. So it's a great option for you to kind of find all your Flyers content. Make sure to check out our stuff on there. All right, let's get into it. We don't have too much news, but there is some stuff to talk about a little bit, some more NHL focused. Like Vasily was saying, there's kind of more things happening around the league. We're going to talk a little bit about the Askarov trade, but before, there is a rookie showcase that just happened. And I had the list open. Here it is. Yeah. So there's a NHLPA rookie showcase where they essentially pull in all of the rookies from around the NHL. Not all of them, at least, but they highlighted ones. Essentially, opportunity to like get autographs, take pictures for sports cards, and it's really just an opportunity to see all these guys in one place in one time. Mostly just pure media event, but the Flyers actually had two invitees. The one most obvious is Matvey Michkov, clearly part of the upper echelon of rookies around the league. But then the other, I guess, more surprising because we don't really think of him as a rookie, though technically he is, but by NHL rules, I believe he is outaged himself from being in the Calder race. So even if it has like a phenomenal rookie year, Ivan Fedotov is not really a rookie, but this is his first year in the league. But it does tell me that he is kind of recognized as being an upper echelon rookie by being invited. That he is at least getting some media recognition. Let me go through the some of the highlighted names here, and then Vasili react to it. So Macklin Celebrini will be there. Easton Cowan will be there. Samus Casey will be there. Nate Danielson. So actually, let me say the teams there. So obviously Celebrini, the Sharks. Easton Cowan, the Maple Leafs. Samus Casey with the Devils. Nate Danielson with the Red Wings. Josh Doan, son of oh my God,
Shane
what's
Doan.
Shane Doan? Thank you. Son of Shane Doan will be there for the Utah Hockey Club. Crazy, they still have a name. Dalibor Dvorsky will be there representing the Blues. Cutter Gauthier will be there representing the Ducks, obviously. Lane Hudson from the Canadians will be there. Nikolai Kovalenko for the Avalanche. Jonathan Leckermacky. Again, a lot of these guys are top picks of previous drafts, or guys who have at least become top prospects, like Lane Hudson, Leckermacky from the Canucks, Artem Levshinov from the Blackhawks, Ivan Miroshenko, I always say his name wrong, from the Capitals. Mahakhmadulin, former Devil, was traded to the Sharks. Frank Nazar from the Blackhawks will be there. Noah Ostlund will be there for the Sabres. Matt Rempe, which is an interesting name, will be there for the Rangers, probably just because this is kind of what I was referring to earlier with Ivan Fedotov, right? Just a big name rookie because Rempe kind of had his rookie year already. But obviously he's been such a popular name, being so massive and
Yeah.
fighting.
And he wasn't in the showcase last season, most likely,
Oh,
so
okay.
why not?
Yeah, that's a great point. And then just I guess the two more here, and there is a longer list, but two more. Will Smith for the Sharks as well. They're very well represented on this day, especially with Will Smith and Celebrini being the highlights. And then Akil Thomas for the Kings there. So some real good young talent there. Not all the young talent from around the league, but pretty cool to see them all in one place, and pretty cool to see Flyers have two players there, not just one.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting just to see the NHL recognizing Michkov and Fedotov. I mean, for Michkov, it's kind of a no-brainer considering the pedigree surrounding him.
Yep.
For Fedotov, I mean, Yariv and I were kind of talking offline about it. He is technically a rookie by NHL standards. He cannot actually compete for the Calder Trophy. He's aged himself out of that. But even though he is technically a rookie, like for him, I mean, it's a new league and everything, but he's probably like one of the veterans really there that's going to be at this rookie showcase,
He's
considering
definitely
his
the
age,
oldest. He's
right?
definitely the oldest
Yeah,
one there.
he's 28, correct?
I think he's did. I was just about to look that up. Whether he turned no, he's still 27. He turns 28 in November. So
Okay, so but still, yeah, he's still definitely probably the oldest player there, oldest rookie there most likely. But it's definitely a cool
not the
experience
biggest.
for, yeah, which is
With
strange.
him and Rempe, both 6'8".
I know, right? Who would think that he'd have a competition there with the height,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
guess with Rempe, even Mahak Madulin's like huge too. I
I
don't know
think
if he's
he's like
6'8",
six. I
but he's
think
like,
he's 6'5". Let me look it up.
yeah, but
Go ahead. I'm
that's
sorry.
big. That's like that's I mean a big dude by all means. But yeah, like I think it's just good for Fedotov, Michkov to kind of go to these NHL events like this. I think that helps them probably get a cut more accustomed to the North American lifestyle.
He's 6'4".
Okay.
He's
Having
still
to
pretty tall.
travel and things like that and just be in new places. Like I think there was a picture that was on Instagram. I believe I'm not sure if it was Fedotov's Instagram or Michkov's, but it was
It's Mitchkov.
Okay, yeah, it was a picture of Michkov, Fedotov, and Slava Kuznetsov like in a hot tub somewhere in Colorado,
With
where like the rookies.
Kuznetsov.
Yeah,
Throwback, dude.
I know. It is definitely a
It looked
throwback.
like they were sitting with a mob boss,
I know.
right?
That's what I thought too. I'm like, who is this guy? And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's the translator and who like works for the Flyers, also like former skate coach. So it kind of
Yeah.
makes sense that he's going around with them just to like add, like a layer of comfortability. Just because even though they're probably getting better with English, there's still certain things they
Well,
need assistance with, need help
for
with,
sure.
obviously. And
Probably
I'm sure,
the
oh
reading
yeah.
part, right, while
And
traveling.
I'm sure too, like just with like the showcase and everything, there's going to be some sort of media availabilities. So they probably want him there for that. But all in all, like I think having Michkov and Fedotov go to something like this, just will probably help them throughout the season because even though they're going to be there with, players that aren't technically their teammates or anything, it's still players that are in the
Great point.
NHL,
Yeah.
still players that, they can talk to and,
It's a
try
small
to potentially
community.
make
Yeah.
friends with. Exactly. So it's just adding another layer of like comfortability, another layer of, okay, you're, an NHL player now. This is how we're going to treat you as an NHL player. So maybe the perks of that too.
Yeah.
And getting to go to
I
something
mean,
pretty cool.
you
So
figure at least not so much in Fedotov's, definitely not in Fedotov's career, but Michkov has played against these guys at least
yeah,
until the banning, right? To some degree, they're around the same age.
exactly.
Yeah. So,
So it's pretty
ooh, go
cool,
ahead.
but I think also like the most interesting part for me is when was the last time when was the last time a Flyer was a part of this showcase? Like I can't even remember.
I don't know. I mean, but
Definitely
I
not
would
last
assume no.
season, right?
If they're, I don't really even remember them that well because like this year it's such a big deal because Mitchkov, but I would imagine Nolan Patrick would have been invited to something like this
Oh, for sure, yeah.
back in the day, being a second overall pick.
I think
Maybe Provorov
Frost as
and
well
Konechny.
would have like I think I heard something saying that Frost like was geared up to go, but then all this COVID stuff happened and they
Right.
canceled
That's
it. So
yeah.
there was probably, a few rookies for the Flyers like York and Frost who kind of missed out on that due to
Yeah.
COVID, but at least, it's a chance for Michkov and Fedotov to get more accustomed to North America outside of Philadelphia, right? Because obviously I doubt they've had the chance to experience Colorado or where they're holding this beforehand. So it's, just
Have
another city to kind
have
of get
you
used to.
have you been to Colorado before?
Not myself personally. Have you been?
Oh, dude. Yeah. Well, you're not that far. Well, I guess you are. You're probably just as far as I am. Actually, thinking about it now, you might even be a little bit closer. But Colorado is amazing, especially if you're. They do have a great city like Denver, but like you don't go there just because the city is cool. Like the mountain views out there are very special. Like if anybody's listening to this has not been to Colorado before, the air is cleaner than like majority of America, and it's just a super clean, really beautiful place. And if you're a fan of hiking, like you will find definitely the best hiking in America. Even though PA is actually pretty good for hiking, but there's just nothing like um Colorado. I've
Yeah,
been
the
to
mountains, the
oh
altitude,
dude,
it's probably beautiful, right? So
it's one of my favorite states to visit, like hands down. And I've been all throughout the country. I actually like Colorado more than California, even though I'm more of a beach guy. But I enjoyed my time more in Colorado than most parts of California. It's
yeah.
hard to judge because California kind of has everything. They
And I
have
feel like
like
that scenery is kind of unique in a sense where you're not going to every city and seeing something like that. Whereas
right.
in other areas, every city, every town has a beach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Exactly. Cali is like the highlights, like the beach fronts, which are pretty dope. I'm a fan of
yeah, they're
beaches.
great. I mean, from when
And
I went, it was really, really
yeah,
cool. But
California is a place to visit. I wouldn't want to live at least in the greater LA area. I have tried that. I do love San Diego, and I do love San Francisco. San Diego is my favorite. And there's all parts across the coastline that are just absolutely beautiful. Like Santa Barbara is like picture perfect, but like Colorado is like an option to live there. My cousin lives out there. I've had some best friends that lived out there. And I just been there. It's just like you're 20 minutes away from like the best hiking, like at all times. So it's like the same way you live in like a beach area, you're just like you're living in a mountainous, out. It's like an outdoorsy person's heaven. That's like the best way to advertise
Yeah.
that place. Like REI has a I think their headquarters are in Colorado or in Denver, and like they have like an office there, and then they have like a big store, and they have a whole test facility which is built into like the surrounding area, and they just have like a river that runs through it, that they like test their equipment down the river that like runs through the city. It's just like it's an outdoorsy person's heaven. So it's like really, really, and very strange weather out there. Like it can be cold and hot in the same area. So anyway, it's really good that like they got to experience that part of America. Not good for free agency, but definitely good for for like you said, I like what you were saying, right? It's good for them to get out there, experience, what it's like to be an NHLer. It's like the closest thing they'll get to like realistically an all-star game in the near future, right? Michkov, I'm sure we'll see one, but it's kind of like top players that they'll see again. They're going to
Yeah,
play against
exactly.
them. They're going to play with them potentially, in all-star games and stuff like that in the future. And I had been thinking about a lot about Fedotov. We really don't know what to expect from him. I do kind of trust in the Flyers scouts. While I do understand they gave him an overpayment for what he offered us in a short sample size, they had been scouting this guy for years. While I think they wanted him here and understood they had to give him, a comparable money to what he was making in Russia to get him here, I don't think they would have made that move just to be nice, just to have him fulfill his dream, right?
Yeah.
I think they did it because even if they overpaid him, I don't think in their mind they overpaid him substantially. Like they
I
overpaid him
think
by 800K
I
per
think their
year.
thought process is he can
One
at
one
least,
million, two,
yeah, he can at least be a solid 1B to Urson and take some of the pressure off.
or even just a good backup, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Any of that. But like my thought process is the guy was, kind of away from hockey, had to be enlisted into the military for a full year, had a full year off of hockey. I think for a goaltender especially that can be difficult because a lot of it is so like repetition based and technique based that imagine having a full year where you're not really playing against professionals where the rest of your career or the rest of the years beforehand you were in that situation continuing to get better, so it's almost like it was a setback for him, like not even with his typical like goaltending techniques like your butterfly, like all of that, and kind of building on that and iteratively becoming a better player. But
Yeah.
I just think like when you have that much time away from the game, it can never be a good thing. And the fact that he had that 1 year in the KHL to kind of bounce back, and people are saying, well, he didn't have the greatest numbers that he had in the past, but when you have all that time off, how could you expect that? So I think maybe it's a best case scenario in the sense that he had that kind of buffer year in the KHL, kind of get your feet back under you in terms of, where you were and where your game was prior to the hiatus. And
Hmm.
now you had a full summer of training to get back on track and get back to, the level he probably thinks he should be at. And I think, he was a top KHL goaltender for years, was the MVP for Siska when they won the Gagarin Cup. So I just think with a goalie like this, who has had a lot of pedigree around him over the years, has had just a lot of news surrounding him over several years at this point, and this is kind of his first time really making his debut. Like he obviously had his debut last season, but this is really his debut season. When we think about it, I think he wants to probably make a good impression and also prove to others that, hey, like I'm the real deal and I'm going
Yeah.
to be able to contribute and I'm not going to be a liability, right?
Yeah. And I know a lot of people think of him as like old. I'm not saying he's still developing because that's wouldn't be very accurate. I mean, he's going to be 28 during the season. So it is
He's in
like
his prime
he's in,
essentially.
yeah, he's in his prime age, but like you said, he missed an entire year due to the military service, then came back and went from playing an average of like 26 games a year to playing 44 games a year, where his record for Siska in the year he came over to the Flyers was 21, 22, and 1. So they weren't very good. He was 1-4 in the playoffs. And mind you, his numbers were pretty comparable in the playoffs to how they were in the regular season. But clearly, it was a middle of the road team. The prior year, they had a better record. He played less games. He took a year off, and then came in and played more games than he's ever played in a KHL season. His previous high was 32 games. So, you know, he also kind of evolved into being the go-to guy in the KHL. And mind you, like he had a year of disruption, like Vasili was saying, which is huge. And then came over to us, in different equipment and thrown into games. So it's like so hard for us to judge him. But I'll say this, okay? Was I more comfortable with Carter Hart and then Ersson as a backup? Absolutely. I also think Carter Hart is a better goalie than both Ersson and
Well, that's the truth of the matter. I
right,
mean,
and
if you look at
Fedotov.
his style, the way he played, his poise on the ice, technique, all that type of stuff. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the goalie tandem the Flyers are going with is going to be terrible, right? Like I think they're both adequate goaltenders that can provide them at least at the minimum league average, and that's what you need, right? You need
Yeah.
average goaltending to get by in the NHL.
Yeah, I see, and that's exactly what I wanted to get to. It's like they both show promise, right? Like, yes, Fedotov is older, but he's not in his 30s, right? He's 27 years old right now. He's starting his NHL career. Most NHL goalies don't really get good till they're about 27 years old. This
Most
is
start
his
25, so
right, exactly. They don't touch the NHL till they're 24. Even Erson's a little bit ahead of schedule. He's kind of like right on schedule, but a little bit ahead, and was kind of forced into a starting role, a little bit ahead of schedule. But I was listening to the Flyers broadcast roundtable. They do those periodically. They'll probably do more of them now that the season is approaching. And I was listening to Brian Boucher, and he's like, "I'm a fan of Sam Ersson," and I when I don't have many reservations about Sam Ersson. Like I don't look at him as like, oh man, our goaltending could be terrible this year. It's more of like I know Ersson's going to be pretty good. Can he be great? That's what I'm waiting to see
that's the
because
question mark. Yeah,
he's shown flashes of greatness, right? We saw that especially when he was back up to Carter Hart. Um, but it's can the tandem be solid, right? Can they rotate? Can Ersson play 60% of the games and Fedotov play 40% of the games, right? Without having to rely on Ersson at a young age, right? We wore him down last year. Everybody knows that. We talked about it endlessly. But it's like, can that tandem work? And the good thing is if the tandem doesn't work and the Flyers stink, they're loaded up for the draft. We brought this up over and over again. There is a contingency plan. I do listen to Bill Matz and Charlie O'Connor a lot, and Bill's like always so upset that the Flyers haven't done anything, and he's wondering like when they're going to get better. But like I get why people feel that way, and it's a justifiable feeling of like wanting to go out there and making a trade and bringing in like
for
another
sure.
young talent. All of that makes sense to me. And if it happened, I'm not crying about it. I promise you that much. But I do understand the need to allow this to play out, you
They're
know?
sticking to the plan. Like they sold a bill of goods. They essentially said, "This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna try to build it a little bit slower through the draft, something the fans might not be as accustomed to. Maybe the
Right.
Hextall era was their first kind of view into something like that. But even in the Hextall era, like other than the Patrick pick and kind of lucking into that, they didn't really have as many high picks as this kind of regime in the last couple
No,
of years of
this I've
Fletcher have
never seen
had.
anything like this, dude. For the
Yeah, right. So
Flyers?
I think for the Flyers and the fans in general, like it's definitely a switch up in philosophy because the Flyers have always been a team that, big game hunting, let's get that free agent, let's make that big trade, let's make that splash. And not to say that Briere and the staff aren't going to do their due diligence and make a trade that makes sense because we saw the Provorov trade, we've seen
Yeah.
some other moves that they've made. They will make a move if they need to, like Gauthier for Drysdale, for example. I just think that they realize they need to still kind of build up their prospect pool through the draft so they can really have a deeper pool and extend that out for years to come because they're trying to do this and make the team a contender for multiple seasons here, not just for
Yeah.
a one and done type of situation. And not to say the Flyers of past, like the Flyers staff and management of past regimes were looking for one and dones, but it just felt like there wasn't an overarching plan to a lot of what some of the management staff were doing. Whereas at least with Briere and Jones, you can point to it and say, hey, they sold us this when the tenure started. And a year and a half into things, it's essentially the same plan. Nothing has really
Yeah.
changed effectively. And I think
Well,
that's a good thing in a sense.
yeah, and to be honest with you, I anticipate a big move coming. I agree with the Flyers based off the current landscape of where they're at. Again,
Just
I'm
not the
not
time.
it's not the time. Right. Exactly. It's like, do I think I don't know everything behind the scenes and there might be opportunities ahead of when I think they'll be able to? Yes. I think that's possible too. And quite frankly, I do trust in Briere to make a big move eventually. They will need to make a big move. That's almost inevitable. They will have a sheer numbers game,
Yeah.
in at least a year from now, with all of the young players that they are bringing into the system, eventually there will have to be space made for some of these younger guys. And you're going to want to load up on the top of the lineup and then bring the young guys in. So something will have to give eventually, whether it be move Farabee down the line. Obviously, Scott Lawton's the name we know about, right? Like we won't be able to hold on to all of these guys, right? Like, will Bobby Brink be here for the long haul? We don't really know, right? We know we can label a few of the guys here for the long haul, but some of these guys we don't know where they're going to end up being. But I do trust that when that time comes, there will be a big move, and I think what happened too is that the Flyers brought in Fedotov at the end of the year. They traded Cutter Gautier's rights halfway through the year. Like, a lot of the big moves kind of happened during the season last year, and I anticipate that probably will be the case this year too.
For
Like,
sure, it's possible.
yeah, like I think if you really, because think about it, and you probably agree with me on this, is like, as the season goes on and teams find out where they are in the standings, right? Let's say past December, right? Like, let's say into the new year in 2025. Some teams already are kind of like, well, we're either barely making the playoffs or we're not making it at all. That's where some teams, they can start their plan for the following year, or start unloading players, or finding out what guy doesn't fit, right? The opportunities don't go away in the offseason, right? And if anything, during the season, when when it isn't those large contracts, that is actually a larger opportunity to trade the younger guys, right? Where you're not moving around $6-7 million contracts, right? And up. Those are predominantly left for either the trade deadline, where guys are on expiring deals, or the offseason, right? Where teams are reshaping their org. So
Yeah.
for what the Flyers specifically need, when it's most likely a guy who's not getting paid, in excess of $4 million a year, right? But maybe like a 22-year-old, 23-year-old player who hasn't hit his potential or isn't quite there yet. Those are the type of the moves the Flyers will probably look to make during the season, when they find out who they are too. And what happens if the Flyers repeat, which I know people say is completely unlikely, but we heard that shit last year. We heard
You just have
all
to
three
wait
of
and
our,
see. I think with the addition of Michkov and the younger guys, potentially taking a step, like, anything's on the table. And just to jump off your point there too with the trading, I think, yeah, like the table and the door is probably wide open depending on what it is and if it makes
yeah,
sense. And I also think those in-season trades were kind of a bit of a tease from Briere to fans in a sense, because they're thinking, well, look at our GM making all these trades in season. Imagine what he's going to do during the
right.
offseason, and then didn't
Yeah,
do much, right?
so
So
true.
you're
Yeah,
probably thinking, like, if you're a fan, you're probably looking at it thinking, well, he's making all these trades now in season, which is rare, doesn't necessarily always happen. That means this offseason he's really going to go like full bore and make even more moves. So
and it's like the
maybe that
opposite.
made, yeah, it's like the opposite. So I could see why some fans probably anticipated moves and then are a little bit disappointed when there isn't. But
Right.
I think if you listen to the management and kind of what they're saying, there is an overarching plan. They're not straying from it, and I think that's something to probably be happy with. Versus, Chuck Fletcher's regime, where there was a plan and then they changed the plan and then they had another plan, they changed that plan again, and there really wasn't any sort of like concrete direction that the organization was going in. It was almost in like a free fall or like a standstill type of situation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think those are very, very good points. I also think people are like obsessed with names, which I totally empathize with. And look,
It's
I'm
fun to
like,
get the big name player.
well, to be honest with you, man, I'm 37, dude. I've seen and I've been watching this team die hard since I was a little kid, right? Like, I have seen so many trades come through, especially under like
Same
what the
here.
Holmgren
Yeah.
and the Bobby Clark era. I've seen, and even Fletcher, right? And like, you get excited about these players, and the trades almost never play out the way you think they're going to play out. A lot of them are never as good. Some are better than you think. And like I kind of just I'm over the I'm over like the name hunting. I'm over the grass is greener syndrome where you think the like there's and this is a credit to Charlie O'Connor who brought this up on the podcast. I think it was today's podcast or yesterday's, and I thought he made a very valid point that Flyers have been burned with the prospects, right? So like people are very hesitant with our prospect pool, which you should be. I don't disagree with, but they do not seem to apply that same rule to the other team's prospects. They seem to only apply it to ours. Where
Yeah.
like no, the general rule all across the league. Yeah, you can pick and choose the top ones that worked out for you. But we've gone through the draft picks. We've
It's
gone
typically
through
a crapshoot. Yeah.
14 years of it. I don't care where the guy was picked or where he was ranked. It's irrelevant. Like people act like this team, doesn't have high end talent, right? But then again, you look at this roster and how many guys of this roster were taken in the first round or the top half of the first round. And it's like, it doesn't even seem to really matter to people because they easily forget that, right? But that is what draft picks are. That is who they are more likely to turn out to be. They're not more likely to be Connor Bedard, right? Like they're more likely, unless you're picking one or two in the draft, they're more likely just to be good players in the league. The stars are kind of found all throughout the draft, and it's so hard to predict when these guys actually break out and find. And we'll talk about the prospect pool a little bit later, but like I think Jet Luchenko's situation is a perfect example of that. How many people are already labeling him as a third line player or a max second line player. And I'm like, I would hold on all of that because you have no idea. The reason we got so excited about Michkov, and there should always be that hint of skepticism, until he does it. But it's the reality is what this guy's pedigree was prior, which was like generational level
Yeah.
productivity. And then you look at the fact that he has delivered on it again and again and again. And it's the
There's a
same reason.
tangible track record to look at.
Well, it's also, if you look at a guy like Connor Bedard, it's every level that they go to, their level
Exactly.
of play goes up. That is pretty rare. Like
Yeah.
for all the knock on Michkov, like not being over a point per game or whatever, which I haven't really heard in the KHL, it's like he was one pneumonia away from breaking the record for a guy his age. He jumped into a higher league and produced like a veteran. Like that's so rare. We can literally count the amount of players in all
Whoa.
of Russian hockey that have done it on two hands, right? It's like
Yeah.
that puts him in the 1% of the 1%
That's my
of
thought process
hockey
with
players.
Michkov, right? Like for me, at least with what he's done, and this is why it's kind of different from other prospects like a Lachenko or like somebody maybe out of major junior, for example. Like Michkov, even when before his draft season, like he already played in the KHL. He already had a bit of a sample size in that
Right.
league against men. Like I always hold that, at least in my opinion, to a higher regard when you're trying to analyze like a prospect and what their potential and what, their ceiling might be, right? If you're performing at this level at a very young age, 17, 18, 19 against men in one of the top leagues in the world, that just points to the fact that as you continue to grow and develop, the chances are you will also get better from the point that you're at. So I think there's just more of a tangible track record to look at when you're playing in leagues against men and in upper echelon leagues where like when you look at majority of prospects getting drafted, that's not the case. They're playing in the OHL, in the QMJHL, in the WHL, in other junior leagues, USHL, for example, against players that and prospects that are their own age. And the production is still something to look at and something to analyze, but you always have to take the grain of salt that when these guys move a level up and play against 30-year-olds, are they going to be able to do the same things that they did when they're playing against 17, 16, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds? Probably not the case.
Yeah.
For some, it is, but for some, it isn't. And that's where you kind of see the boom and bust cycles for prospects, where some guys
Yeah.
could do it at a younger age when, the competition was less severe. But when you up the ante, they're unable to kind of do the same things, right?
Right. And that's where like you see a guy like Denver Barkey putting up 100 points in the league, but that, I don't compare that the same. I like think of his track record more like Morgan Frost, than I do like somebody like Michkov, right?
Yep.
And you know that's why like a lot of times people get more excited about college athletes players, right? Because they're
A little
bigger,
older.
stronger competition. That's why everybody gets excited about a guy like Celebrini, who could be like a Jonathan Taves, maybe even more offensively. We'll see, but we'll kick that a little bit down the road because we're gonna get into prospects. Um, judging by all the Flyers changes, the big story that went out like last week that we talked about was Ryan Johansson. As of right now, the termination of Johansson's contract seems to somewhat be in flux. While they did announce that they put him on waivers for the purpose of termination, it has not officially happened yet. We can only assume that the Flyers have not fully followed through with this because there is a deal being negotiated on the other end. Now, we talked about this, about the likelihood of there being a deal of some sort. We don't
Yeah.
know what Johansson's going to get. I think, I'll be honest with you, it's in his best interest to allow them to waive him, to admit that he's not injured, and then to go down to the AHL and get all of your money. But if they are really going to fight this, he is going to end up getting less
Most
than he
likely some
thought.
sort of settlement. And I would have to say, like, and I said this last week, right? Like, this is really between the NHL and the NHLPA. Like, the NHL are representing the Flyers here. And, if the NHL didn't think the Flyers had a valid case, they wouldn't have allowed this to happen because
Right.
they wouldn't want to be put involved or be put into this type of situation. And how many players, get injured and end up staying on LTIR their whole career and the NHL doesn't question it. So for the NHL to be willing to go through something like this, it also kind of proves that they think something is fishy and that they probably are for terminating the deal because they don't want other players to take advantage of a good faith system that they kind of have employed here in terms of injuries. And when you think about injuries in the NHL, like it's a really common practice. Like hockey's a very physical sport. Players
Yeah.
get hurt all the time. You don't want players to start taking advantage in potentially the way that Johansson is. I did want to mention just a couple tidbits from Elliot Friedman that he had in his 32 Thoughts article that came out this week. So shout out to Elliot because, I mean, he's the best in the game, the best in the business. He really broke it down flawlessly. So I'll read what Elliot had to say. So he essentially said, I didn't get a chance to ask Daly, so that's Bill Daly, about Ryan Johansson, whose contract can be terminated by Philadelphia. He's got 8 million remaining. Agent Kurt Overhart is preparing for a fight, and the Flyers wouldn't pursue this without a behind-the-scenes wink from the NHL. I don't like to question injuries, especially since anyone who's played 905 games like Johansson is guaranteed to have certain legitimate ones. I'm told the key will be everyone navigating how he went from not missing games and practices in Colorado to how he was unable to play for either Philadelphia or AHL's Lehigh Valley. The timing is a little weird, which probably has something to do with video of Johansson dancing at his wedding. Again, I wouldn't try to handicap this except for saying the NHL and NHLPA hate risking precedent from an arbitrator, so a settlement is always the preference without an airtight case. So it's kind of what we're saying. Like the fact that the termination hasn't gone through officially from the Flyer side probably points to the fact there's some sort of settlement in the works. And it points to really what Elliot said at the end of that little excerpt I read. The NHL and NHLPA don't want an independent legal arbitrator setting a precedent for their league. They want to be the ones that kind of handle this in-house before it goes that route, most likely. So, yeah, like I think we're probably on the route to some sort of settlement. When it happens, who knows? But I'd
Yeah.
imagine the goal of both parties, NHL or NHLPA, is going to be
Yeah.
let's try to have this settled before the seasons begin here.
Yeah. And they might opt, you know, they might opt to the buyout rate in the end. But again, I really think Johansson kind of dug himself into a hole here because if he just went to the AHL, got your surgery
This would be a
during,
non-story, yeah.
yeah, if you really are injured, which again, I do believe to an extent too. We even said it in the trade, you might have some kind of
Lingering,
ongoing
yeah.
lingering problem. Get that surgery during the season. You don't have to travel with the team, but
And you're getting paid.
let the
Yeah.
Flyers waive you. You're actually going to make more money because you don't need to pay into escrow. Like I feel like this whole fight he put up, I maybe they just didn't anticipate the Flyers being able to do anything about this. Um, but at the same time, I feel like this was a foolish move and not a
Yeah.
great move by the agent. Maybe overzealous, like a
That's
little.
my thought process here, Eve.
Yeah,
Uh, because if you think about it, like how many other players claim injury and you've ever seen this happen? So they probably thought it was status quo. Like we're going to say
right.
I'm injured and it's going to all go away and you're not going to have to go to the AHL and you're going to get paid. And everything's hunky dory, but obviously the Flyers have some sort of evidence that's not the case. And I think really the
They probably
main
spoke
cult
to Colorado.
potentially, yeah, like that's what I was gonna say. I think the main culprit is the fact that you played a day or a day and a half before you got traded. It went to the morning skate, like played 63 games that season, didn't barely miss a game, and now you're suddenly injured as soon as you want to send you to the minors. It
Right.
kind of, points to something not being right and something probably happening behind the scenes that shouldn't be. So
Yeah. Like it's tough because I don't want to see a player bullied by an organization, but this seems like it was done in bad faith on the
yeah,
outside. And with the guy's reputation, it seems like this will be the end of him in the NHL. I think if he does want to play hockey, he's going to have to probably go overseas. He probably doesn't need to because let's be honest, he made millions of
made a lot
dollars.
of money. Yeah.
He's a multi-millionaire. I do think he probably is owed some kind of compensation. But I definitely think he kind of ruined it for himself where he could have just collected the rest of his money. And the worst thing you have to do is play hockey in a league that you can dominate. And
And even maybe he could have repaired his career. Like, let's say he
right.
went to the AHL and put up like over a point a game. Let's say
Yeah.
a center on the Flyers got injured. You think they wouldn't call him up? Like, even if
Or
they
or
don't like
somebody
it,
might be interested to trade for him.
yeah, exactly, right? So like you almost shot yourself in the foot by not going there because now there's a guarantee that no team's going to want to deal with you or touch you just because of the
Right.
antics that you're putting onto the Flyers. They wouldn't want to have to deal with maybe something like that happening to them
Yeah.
potentially. So
And a guy who's still capable of putting up 35, 40 points, and the Flyers would have retained half of your salary again. They would have somebody potentially might have traded for him for
yep.
$2 million for a guy who can put up 40 points in the league. Like, especially one of the teams that aren't that good or the teams that have a severe injury. He was a high pedigree player. And it's like, this should be like a lesson to a guy like Dubois, who I don't know. Look, I'm not going to say they're the same guy or anything like that, but it's like you can be removed from like being part of the league, if you have like a bad attitude, because he is kind of going in that direction with, every time he signs a contract, it gets soured on him, pretty quickly. And he's asking for a lot of money, right? Like Johansson asked for a lot of money and then didn't deliver on that. So I don't know. It's a tough situation. I do hope that the Flyers kind of get there. I think no matter what, they're going to get under LTIR usage for the season from it. But I'm not looking forward to like if they have to have 1.6 million against the cap for the next 4 years, like that would be annoying. So I
I
hope
think
that they,
that's what they're trying to avoid most likely. So
yeah, I would like for them to just be like, we'll give them 2 million over 2 years or whatever, um, or 2 million over the next 2 years, so $4 million or whatever. We'll pay him that, and it's still going to be annoying. But again, it fits within that window of the other retained money that they have. But it sucks. The Flyers are like constantly eating away at their cap space with these like cap problems. But they got to get rid of this problem at this point. Like it's kind of getting ridiculous. Even just dropping him to the minors would have saved them 1.15
yeah,
against the
exactly.
cap and would have brought them under their limit. And he didn't even allow them to do that. He just kind of really put them in a hard place. And it's not up to you to decide on what the team does with you. You didn't negotiate that into your contract. It is what it is, dude. And you're still getting paid millions of dollars. So I do wonder if like Nashville is gonna, get involved in this too to some degree. Just because they are tied into half of his contract. So and they don't want to get hit with a large sum. They probably also want the amount they owe him to some of that to come off their cap too, because they're trying to make a Stanley Cup run this year. So the NHL is against them. So, and I doubt the NHLPA is going to like lay down, but um, I don't know. I hope this gets resolved soon, rather than string into the season. But you never really know. You never really know. So the other big piece of information was we brought up that Askarov requested a trade
Nashville.
out of Nashville. Thank you. Out of Nashville because of the UC Soros situation, and then having Wedgwood in there as the backup, which again Makes no sense to me as to why he didn't just go with Saros and Askarov.
Yeah,
But
that's puzzling to me. I just don't understand why Nashville didn't want Askarov to be the backup and like just kind of ease him into the NHL for his first season. And
yeah,
then at least like if you think about the trade value, let's say he had a dominant season as a rookie or like looked lights out, then you would have got an even better return. Whereas now like people are kind of saying this return that, the Sharks put forth was a little bit underwhelming, and that seems to be the case, honestly, with a lot of goalie returns around the league. Like,
right.
unless you're an upper echelon goaltender, like you're really not getting what the fair value is, especially as an 11th overall pick that he was. So
Yeah, and it's a reminder of why you do not take goalies this high anymore in the NHL. Because you risk missing out because you really only have two spots in the NHL for so that guy like has to be your guy.
yeah,
If you're taking such a high risk on him. Yeah, I don't think great handling from Nashville. And I do think the Sharks made out in this one. So let me go through the full trade. So the Sharks received Yaroslav Askarov, Nolan Burke, who, just a quick background, 21-year-old undrafted center, 6'1", good in the OHL in his later years, spent most of his time in the ECHL last year. Wasn't even a point per game player
seems
there,
like a
but
throw-in type of
yeah,
player.
it looks like he's going to be like a solid AHL player. And a 2025 third round pick, originally belonging to the Colorado Avalanche. The Nashville Predators received David Edstrom, a former first round pick, number 32 overall, a conditional 2025 first round pick belonging to the Vegas Golden Knights, and goaltender Mangus Krona, a youngish goaltender who had he's a former fifth round pick. Didn't have too much success in the NHL. Actually, pretty piss poor numbers in 9 games, and not great numbers in the AHL either. And spent a little bit of time in the ECHL. So looks like really the centerpiece of that trade was David Edstrom in the first round pick. Do I think the Flyers could have matched this deal?
They could have.
Potentially. They probably would have had to give up either multiple first or one of the high second
Bonk in a
first.
first or something like that,
I think
maybe.
Bonk
Yeah.
would have been too much, to be honest with you, just because I would say he's higher value than everybody and everything involved. That is what others were saying, though, Vasili,
Yeah.
that Bonk would have to been involved. I think more likely it would have been one of the later first round picks, one of the seconds, and then one of our goalie prospects.
Yeah.
Um,
Or Nashville might have asked like, "Hey, we'll give you Askarov, give us Urson, no picks involved," maybe
right.
something weird like
But
that. But I don't
but
know if the Flyers would have been interested because technically, even despite Askarov's pedigree, I mean, he hasn't done it in the NHL yet. Urson has looked good in the NHL. So do you want to take that risk over something unproven,
well,
something a little bit more proven, right?
which is why Nashville wanted to stick with Soros, right? They're going for a Stanley Cup. They don't necessarily have room to risk on a young goalie, but they do in
Yeah.
a backup role. That's why I'm confused by it. Why would they would have
That's
Wedgwood?
That's the
And
weird thing to me. Like, why not just have Askarov be the backup? But maybe they know something that we don't, like
there
about
has
his
to be.
attitude. Maybe he's
Well,
not willing to
it.
be a backup. I don't know what that really means, but you're a
Well, I
rookie,
mean, I
right?
could
It's like
kind of understand
you have
that.
to cut your teeth. You have to cut your teeth at some level at some point. You can't just automatically be the starter. Like even with San Jose, like they do have Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek that are going to be in the crease with him. Like I know Askarov is going to likely be the number one, but what if Blackwood outplays him? Like you never know what's going
Would
to
be
happen.
weird. Would be weird. And I know a lot of people want to jump on the Askarov, but this is kind of I go back to what I was saying earlier. It's like people are obsessed with draft position and name, and I also am high on Askarov. I'm not, I don't want to diminish the guy, but none of these guys are guaranteed. Like Dawson Mercer. I think it was Mercer, right? Was moved this year. He was a number 7 overall pick. Um, like he didn't perform for the Devils. Like it happens very often that guys just end up being good players or average players.
No, it wasn't Mercer. It
Or it
was
wasn't
Holt.
Mercer. Holtz, thank you. Yeah, it
Same
wasn't.
thing though. Same
Well,
idea.
Mercer did have a good season. I
Yeah.
confused the two of them. Thank you. And Holtz, who was a high pedigree prospect,
Yeah.
didn't live up to his name. Doesn't mean he won't be a good player, but again, it's like these are not guarantees. And a lot of times, NHL GMs, especially if they're in that position of Nashville, they're looking for more of a guarantee. But with a backup goalie, I just think that's a position you can take a somewhat of a risk with. So
Definitely.
it's somewhat confusing, but San Jose can absolutely take a risk on Askarov, right? Like they
They
were
don't have
already
anything to lose,
they
so
were they were by far the worst team in the league last year. So they are putting together a crop of a highly talented young players. He definitely fits their timeline. They can take the risk, even if he's not that good. That's okay. They can allow him to develop there. They can, they
yeah.
know that he's their guy for the future. They don't have anybody in their system that equates to him. And even their two starters, they're not that good. Vanacek, I would say,
One Bs, I would say, at the
yeah,
best,
exactly.
right?
They're like
Like,
they're one Bs or backups, right? So
well, at
yeah,
least they have somebody to
it was a
support
good
him.
trade
Like,
for the Sharks.
yeah, for the
Very
Sharks,
good trade.
I don't see any downside for them. Like, they took a swing on a high upside goalie. Is he gonna live up to that potential? I mean, who knows? If he does, he's gonna be the best goalie they've probably had since like Evgeny Nabokov, most likely in terms of like a franchise caliber type of
Yeah, it's
goaltender.
been a while for them. Yeah,
Yeah, I would say like why not make a move like this? You had the assets. You didn't have to give
it
up a
was a good
ton
move.
anyway.
Yeah, it was a good move for
So
them.
Greer made a good move. I still am pretty puzzled just based off like the pedigree Askarov has had and the work rate and everything that he did in the AHL. Like he had impressive numbers and it's a conditional first round pick and it's from Vegas, like who's probably
There,
not gonna have a very
that
high pick at all.
that's
So
why I don't believe that Bonk would have that it would have taken Bonk to get him.
fair enough. Yeah, that's a great point to make. Like when you put it into retrospect like that.
They're
So I'm just
both
yeah.
first round picks were number 32s essentially.
I'm just surprised it wasn't more, but like, once again, I think it goes to the initial point that goaltenders are just not valued as highly in the NHL and the trade market as other positions like defensemen,
Well,
centermen.
because the
Um,
reality is a lot of goalies that are top tier goalies in this league were not found at the top of the
exactly. They were
first
found in
round.
like the fifth round or something
Yeah,
because
or
goalies
even
just the
second round.
development. Well, the development path is just different. Like somebody who
Yeah.
played goalie his whole life growing up, like played, hockey. Like as a goaltender, it's you can be great in juniors, but it doesn't really mean anything after that. It's about how you kind of adapt at the higher levels.
Right.
And a lot of the times goalies, they take years and years of seasoning in the AHL, become really good goalies in that league, and then graduate and also have the same success at the NHL level. That's typically actually how it is for a lot of goaltenders, where they have success in other leagues and then kind of translate that to the NHL.
Right.
But yeah, like I think for the Sharks, it's a no-brainer type of move. For Nashville, it's a little bit puzzling because you didn't really have to even give him away. I think you could have kept him as a backup, increased his trade value, and then traded him for even more down the line. But
Hmm.
maybe there's something behind the scenes we're kind of unaware of there. But
There usually is something,
it's
but
it's definitely interesting to see it happen. Like we heard the rumors, but it it makes sense to me that, I guess Nashville did trade him if there was something going on behind the scenes. Maybe they didn't want that to kind of plague the team throughout the season. So
yeah.
maybe they're like, let's get it done. San Jose wants him now,
Well,
and we're kind of
there
watching the problem, right?
there's also a good idea in just like not assuming that there's always going to be something better down the line. Like if you have a
Yeah.
good deal in front of you, you're getting essentially two first round picks for them. You want to just move forward. You just make the trade. Make the trade, move forward. You're pretty set in the good, but it'd be interesting if like Soros gets injured or something like
Yeah.
that,
Do you
right?
think the Flyers should have made a trade for him or made like a better offer?
I think they
What's your
did make an
thoughts?
offer. I think their offer probably wasn't as good.
Oh
Because
yeah.
well they also don't need a goalie as much as, and they're also kind of stuck, right? Like they already have Erson and they have Fedotov and they can't just get rid of Fedotov.
Yeah.
They have this situation with Kolosov, which I'm sure they would have included in a deal, but then Kolosov now is not a guarantee, right? Even though that probably would have been a better return for
And Krona,
yeah,
definitely.
like Kolosov is a better goalie aspect than what San Jose. That's why I don't believe they would have had to go with like Bonk. I think
Yeah.
realistic it would have been like a first, one of their high seconds, and probably a guy like Kolosov or an equal prospect. But maybe San Jose again, they might love Edstrom, right? Like that might be a guy
Maybe
that
they
they're
see a
high
lot of
on.
upside. Yeah, it's
I
definitely
lo-
possible.
I mean, he had a really good season in the SHL last year at 18 years old. So he
Yeah,
might
and
have been picked
defensemen.
late, but
But how much do we see second round picks for defensemen? Like, or not second round picks? He's a late first rounder, but like, how many times have we seen second rounders, turn out to be the best defenseman? He's
well,
pretty close to
he's a
that, right?
forward. David
Oh,
Edstrom's
he's a forward. Oh, I
he's a
thought he was a
forward.
defenseman. My
He's
mistake
a
there.
6'3" center. So, um,
Well, either way, I mean, you got a big center out to add to the prospect pool, still a good thing. But
that's what I
yeah,
mean. Like, might
like
fit their
for
system too, like what they want. They might have liked him at the draft too, right?
and we're
Like,
like, hey, we wanted this guy all along. Now's our chance. But yeah, for the Flyers, I think it didn't really make a ton of sense unless you were trading one of the goalies back. Because either way, if you traded for Askarov and you didn't trade a goalie back for him, he's going to be in the same situation where he's the third man on the depth
yeah,
chart here because it's just, he has guys ahead of him that have actually played in the NHL at this point. Maybe not Fedotov, but with the contract, they weren't going to just throw him to the wayside. So for the
yeah,
Flyers, I think they're probably like, hey, we have Urson, we have Fedotov, we technically have Kolosov. We'll see what happens there.
yeah. And they still have
Um,
Bjarnason and Zavragin too, right?
exactly.
Which
So
San Jose does not have that
yeah,
behind. Like the Flyers do, and we've had Steve Cornianos say it on here. We have our, at least top five best goalie pool, even without Carter Hart, as far as like prospect wise, like with Kolosov, Erson, and Bjarnason and Zavragin. I mean, the Flyers are pretty set when it comes to goalie prospects. So people might want something fancier by name, but I don't care about any of that stuff. I care about what the guys do when they're in our system and how they start developing. So, and so
agreed.
far, Bjarnason has kind of turned his narrative around pretty quickly after his last tournament play. So we'll see what
Because your
happens.
goalie is Yariv, right? It's all about the team in front of him. So he
Right.
played in front of a really bad team in the WHL, and yeah,
Plus, we need those assets too. They're like the Flyers. While I do think goalie's very important to the team, the Flyers' biggest need still is top line, sure center. And
yeah,
those assets might be in play in the Flyers' mind to achieve that at some point. Like we don't know what they plan on doing during the regular season. We don't know if we'll even pick those two first round picks we have. What if we trade both of them for a young centerman, right? Like
that's totally possible. I think, yeah,
Askarov was 11th overall pick, right? Took
that's what I
two late
mean.
firsts.
I think that's probably a thought process as well. Like, why use these assets we might need down the line that we could potentially parlay into something else that's a bigger need for us versus goalie where we're kind of short up, or at least even if the guys we don't have on the roster right now, Urson and Fedotov turn out, we still at least have Zavrag and Bjarnason in the pipeline that we believe in
Right,
that they may develop. So
right.
no point in wasting the assets,
Yeah.
essentially.
So just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify as well for the audio version. And give us a rating there if you can. It's a humongous help. Okay, let's do the last segment here. I'm going to do a quick screen share where I
I've
have.
been waiting for this segment the whole show. Like this is going to be the best part, I think, of the show. So if you're
Yeah,
still, listening and tuned in, definitely stay
yeah.
on here and let us, make fun of this. So
Yeah. So yeah, that's funny. So yeah, so I found this shared on HF Boards. For those of you not aware what HF Boards is, I brought it before. It's the largest forum for hockey. It used to belong to Hockey's Future, which doesn't exist anymore, but the forum lives on. A huge hockey community on there. Definitely recommended all diehard people. And this is not to pick on the person that shared this, but I saw this shared in the Flyers forum yesterday, and it was kind of brought up as like, oh, the Flyers don't have a good system. Look at how look how shitty our system is, and they pointed to this, right? And they didn't use the word shitty, but
who
um,
made this? Did the guy who posted this make this pyramid, or did he
no,
just
this is
find it somewhere?
it's from Scouching. So it's a internet,
Scouching. Okay.
yeah, it's like an internet scouting, not official like McKean's Hockey or anything like that. It's made by diehard hockey fans who are like want to be scouts or want to work for McKean's or like it's somebody who's like trying to make a name for themselves. So again, looking at this, the first thing I wrote to the person was like when the company that is or when the group is making their rankings and they spell Hunter McDonaldson, You have to question the validity of this. But this is a
It's hard
this
to see too. It's right at the bottom. You can kind of
yeah,
hit
it was
it.
the first thing
Like,
I noticed. I was like, who's
oh,
McDonaldson? Um, so I looked at this, and again, they have kind of a tier here. They have Michkov at the top. Then in the second level, they have Jet Luchenko. Third, they have Alex Ciernik with Denver Barkey and Oliver Bonk. Then the fourth tier, they have Cole Knubel, Ilya Pautov, Devin Kaplan, Jack Berglund, I don't even want to go through all these. Alexis Gendron, Ruhinen, Kolosov, Denoye, Bjarnason, Zavragin, Wisdom, Andre, and Grons. And then the bottom of the tier was Murchison, Powell, Tuamala, Malloy, Bump, Samson, Southern, Zanetti.
McDonaldson, the new great prospect they
Right,
have,
yeah.
obviously.
McLaughlin, Mateo Mann, Sulky, Avon, Gill, McDonaldson, Hunter McDonald, and Ryan McPherson. And first and foremost, putting Mateo Mann on the same level as Tuamala and McDonald and Powell. I mean, that should just be a big warning sign here.
Big
Mateo
red
Mann's
flag.
an ECHL player.
Big red
Um,
flags all across
yeah,
the board here.
yeah. Um, putting Alex Ciernik, which we are all high on here, but in the same level as Oliver Bonk and Denver Barkey, probably not very fair. Not putting Bonk and Luchenko on the same level also doesn't make a ton of
Any
sense.
sense?
This list is a goddamn mess. But the question that this was a topic from last week we didn't get to. It's like how do we feel about the Flyers prospect pool? If you look at this pyramid, you're not going to have any idea that the Flyers actually have like good prospects. But like Alex Bump absolutely does not belong in the bottom tier here. Sammy Tuamala does not belong in the bottom tier here. Hunter McDonald does not belong in the bottom tier. Whoever put this together, there is a lot of lack of knowledge.
It's a
Um,
surface level type of like arrangement where like they've heard of these guys, but they don't really know what's happening. Like my thought process is you have one out of one, like Michkov, that's correct.
sure, that's the easy
Everything,
one.
that's the easiest one. I mean, if they would have messed that up, you might as well just not even look at the list. But
Yeah,
let's like if you think about it, like they have one out of one, and then they're probably like 0 for 20 on basically the rest of the list because
yeah.
it just doesn't make a lot of sense, like the way that it's put together. And I don't want to be rude, like I don't know the person that did this, but we're light on content, so this is fun to kind of go over and talk about. So let's go through it. I mean, first of all, Lachenko by himself in that second tier above Bonk doesn't make any sense. We talked about the soft line, like Bonk should probably be there with Lachenko, Michkov, Lachenko, Bonk. I think that's probably like makes the most sense. Then that third tier, maybe you can go like Siernik, Barkey, probably Kolosov in that third tier, probably Emil Andre in there.
Probably
Um,
Zavragin.
Zavragin. I would put Tuamala in there,
Right,
Alex Bump in there,
right.
Hunter McDonald in there. Like basically half the list that's below that third tier would probably be in the third tier, just based off like what they've done at college, what they've done, in respective junior leagues, things like that. And then you have the rest of the guys after. But what this shows to me, like with this list, is that I guess this person's very high on Jet Lachenko, which maybe is a good thing. Maybe they watched a ton of Jet Lachenko highlights, and that's why he's so high. Like, I don't want to show it entirely, so maybe there is some sort of research being done. But
We
like
should
Yariv
we should
said,
make one of these.
yeah, this would be fun. Actually, maybe we could like do
I'll make a note of that.
some sort of like yeah, I mean, we could just pull up like a Microsoft Visio and kind of build this out ourselves. It'd be actually
Right.
pretty easy.
Yeah.
So we could, yeah, that'll be something for another episode. But
Yeah.
this is sparking us. See, like somebody's work that isn't that great. You can look at it and you can assess it and say, hey, how could I make this better? And we could maybe do our own version of it. But yeah, the red flag is really Hunter McDonaldson. I mean, like I didn't notice that off the bat when you sent this to me. Like initially, I was just like, the first question I had for Yariv was like, why is Luchenko just there by himself? And he's
Yeah.
like, do you see the bottom that says Hunter McDonaldson? I'm like, I didn't even realize that part. But yeah, maybe like Ronald McDonald's half cousin, Hunter McDonaldson
You're right.
decided to become a hockey player or something. I don't know.
So yeah, I guess if we wanted to spitball it. It's kind of hard, but we can talk about like some of the guys that we do think are like there are people out there. Like again, the Flyers had a top 5 prospect pool for years. I learned my lesson. Okay, I learned my lesson. This was years ago. I don't take those lists seriously anymore. Not that I think nobody knows what they're talking about. I just reserve my judgments for what I see when the players get here for me to actually scout them myself. I trust my own ability to scout a player watching him in context rather than I do majority of scouting, right? Like there are some people I do trust, right? Steve Kornianos being one of them, but for the most part, I don't read whatever I read online anymore and go like, oh, this is a reflection of our prospect pool. And I would recommend others to also not do this. You can be high or low. You can have your own opinions on guys. None of that is a problem. And again, you could agree with this list. That's not a problem either. Um, but overall, none of this is going to matter in the future. But like we brought up names already, like Alex Bump has been brought up by Brent Flair himself, saying he's an NHL player. We've seen him play at camp. The guy looks really good,
Yeah, he's not in the
better than
bottom
Alex
tier
Ciernik.
on this list. Yeah.
Yeah, who I really like. I also would not put Alex Ciernik on the same level as Denver Barkey. I don't think he's that far away from it. I don't think Barkey is, miles better than Alex Ciernik, but they're not there. And like I am a little higher on Jet Luchenko than I am Oliver Bonk, but me and Vasili talked about it. Like they should be on the same level because both of them at this point, from what we've seen, like there's no reason to doubt Bonk. There's no reason to doubt Luchenko. If Luchenko takes a step backwards or something, or Bonk comes into the AHL and struggles, then we can have a different story, right? But as of right now, it just doesn't make a lot of
Yeah, the
sense.
evidence isn't there to point to why it's structured in this way if you look at this particular pyramid or whatever this is.
Yeah.
But it's just you know, I think this is a good exercise at least for us because we were kind of talking about it and wondering like what is our thoughts on the Flyers prospect pool, and when you kind of break it down you see all the names in front of you. um Obviously Michkov's a big part of why they're ranked top 15 in a lot of like draft analysts lists and like scouting reports and things like that. But I think there's a lot of guys that are like sneaky good players, like depth finds that the Flyers found in later rounds that might make it to the NHL. And if you just look at like success rate, if you draft a player past the third round, they make it to the NHL. Like that's a huge success story, and the Flyers have been doing a lot of that under Brent Flair's scouting, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's something to kind of be um, excited about, especially for now when they've been drafting in like higher positions than they have been in the past 5 years. So you kind of get that scouting staff to really, be able to kind of analyze those topper or top echelon players and kind of use their skills for that versus trying to find the diamonds in the rough in the later rounds.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was actually just curious. I'm looking up a list from 2021. Um, yeah, to see. Okay, here we go. Here's a beautiful example of why I don't care about these lists. Okay. NHLrumors.com. 2021-22 Dallas Stars prospects. We have something to weigh against this, right? We know who their top young players were in actuality from this time period. And if you look at the top of the list, it's Maverick Bork, who, as of right now, I don't think is an instrumental part. Now, Thomas Harley is number 2, and he has
And
turned
he's
out to
been
be.
really good.
He's
Yeah.
been really good. Number 3, Jake Ottinger, obviously been very good. Number 4, Riley Demani. I don't even know who that is. 5, Logan Stankoven. And again, this is their own internal list. 6, Wyatt Johnston.
He probably should have been number one on the list. Yeah.
That's kind of my point is like they don't really know where these
Yeah,
guys are actually going to turn out. No
exactly.
one really knows. Wyatt Johnston was not considered a top tier prospect when he was taken, but he should have been, right? He was seen as like a late first round pick
Yeah.
type of guy. And the reality is that we're going to go back and we'll look at this prospect pool in 3, 4, 5 years, and our opinions of these players will be different than what we see
Of
today.
course,
The
yeah, because we'll
closest
see
thing,
tangible evidence on the ice, right?
right?
Like
The closest thing we have to a guarantee here is Matvey Michkov.
pretty
That's it.
much. And then to your point too with Bork, like he did have 77 points in 71 games in the A, so he looked pretty good last year in the A. But like he still hasn't done it at the NHL levels, so
Well,
who really
He
knows?
got jumped by other prospects
By Johnson, exactly, right? So
and Stankoven.
yeah, exactly. So just to your point, like the initial rankings don't always, and most of the time aren't gospel and usually does not fall how the
Well,
rankings lay it out.
go,
So
go back to the Claude Giroux trade where and again, we were in that conversation too. We didn't know who the Flyers were going to get for Claude Giroux.
no,
Owen Tippett was initially not at the top of our list, but if you look at the players that were rumored in that trade
it was a
option,
blessing. Yeah.
Sam Miskevich being one of them, none of those guys are even as close to as good as Owen Tippett. Trust in your scouts. I know I get the skepticism from everybody that assumes everything is going to go wrong for us here, but the reality is that's not real. We have either average, slightly below average, or above average success. That's how it goes for all the teams, and it varies from year to year. I'll tell you, I look at this list and I have a lot of players to get excited about. That's how I judge a prospect pool. I go, I see a potential top line forward in Jet Luchenko. People might argue that I don't. I don't see an elite 100-point player there, but I see a guy who maybe could be an 80-point player in the league if he hits his max ceiling and play against the best players in the world. Even if he's a 70-point player, that's still a hell of a pick at number
Yeah. Play on the
13.
penalty kill as well. Like there's other things than the scoring, right? So
Right, exactly. Matvey Michkov, don't even need to say more about him. Oliver Bonk, which at this current point, the way he is producing, everybody wants Sam Dickinson. I see no real difference between Dickinson and Bonk as far as the ceiling. So if Dickinson can be a top pairing defender, as of right now in my mind, Bonk could still potentially be that. If he at the least ends up as a number 3, number 4 on this team, still a good pick at 20. I'm happy with it. Denver Barkey is a guy who could be on the Morgan Frost track, which again, you take a guy who's as good as Morgan Frost in the third round, that's a home run. People might
yeah.
not agree with that. If you find a guy who's a 50 to 60-point player in the third round of the draft, that's a steal. That's an absolute steal. That's a
If you even
late
find an NHL player in the third or fourth round of the draft, that's a
also
steal.
also
So
true. We know we're excited about Alex Ciernik. We know that Cole Knuble has potentially NHL potential, at least as a fourth line role. His father was a late producer. Maybe he will be too. Ilya Paltov is a guy with a high skill set. If he puts it all together, it's similar to Alex Ciernik, right? These guys who maybe they won't end up even playing in the NHL, but they'll be stars somewhere,
there's
right?
some skills that could
Right.
potentially translate down the line. So
Devin Kaplan seems to be like potential bottom 6 forward in the league. We were hoping for more, but he hasn't jumped too much. But an aggressive player, I like it. Jack Berglund, guy reminds me of Michael Hanzus, right? And he was very instrumental for a lot of teams for years. Never a big time name, but very important type of player, two-way guy. Alexis Gendron, goal scoring machine at the lower levels. Will it translate? We don't know. But I'm excited to see if he can do it. If he can do it, it's a home run. It's a third line goal scorer in
there's
the
a lot of
NHL.
skill sets, I think, that if you point to these prospects, you can look at them and say, if they are going to be successful, like
Right.
this is the skill that's going to make them successful. I think that's a good thing to kind of be able to identify with these players. Like if you look at these prospects and you're thinking what stands out and you can't think of anything, that's probably a reason why you might not be excited about a player, right? Whereas if you can find that one skill that they can kind of amplify and even bring to the next level, that's where you find kind of the value in drafting them where you did. So
Yeah. And actually, a great example of that is Zayd Wisdom, right? We were all so high on Zayd Wisdom, and he has really struggled after his first year of success in the AHL. He's like not even come close
not
to.
expected probably too. Most people did not expect that.
So,
So
like, we have to change our opinion of Zayd Wisdom. Does that mean I completely gave up on him? No. But again, we were hoping for a third line, at least a really good bottom 6 forward that we took in I think it was the third round. we were hoping for that from him. He might not turn out to be that way, right? Emil Andre is a guy who's undersized. Helge Grans was a first round pick. So far has not lived up to that name, right? Could be just like another Robert Haig, maybe even worse at this point. Zavragin and Bjarnason both have number one goaltender potential, but we have no idea what they'll end up being. Noah Powell is a really interesting case, right? Nobody really even knows what to make of him right now. Sammy Tuomala had a phenomenal first half of the year in in the AHL, slowed down with some injuries in the second half. We'll see how he does this year, right? Like he could be a dark horse to make the Flyers for all we
I
know,
think he
right?
really could. Especially with the way that Tortorella kind of had his eye on him and was kind of treating him in training camp, and he was really one of the last cuts. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of possibility.
Well,
And I mean, if you look at the prospect pool in general, the fact that there's that many guys we can name that were, there's something about their game that pops or something that we've noticed is probably a good sign moving ahead.
right. And like Zanetti, I don't have too much excitement into. But Gill, he was a first round pick, really young for his age group, like Luchenko. We have no idea what he's going to be. Avon was a free agent pickup that we got. Um, Amazing skater. Hunter McDonald, who was high on him when the Flyers drafted him. Now he's like being penciled into everybody's top six at the NHL level for like next year, right? So it's like we really don't know.
It's a wait and see with any prospect getting drafted. Like you cannot actively judge a draft until probably 3 years after, because most of the prospects aren't going to be making their debuts until that time. There's only like 10, maybe 15 guys that usually typically in a draft class will make their debut a year after being drafted, right? Like
Yeah.
how often does that occur? Not very
And
often.
and if you look at all these names and you think about how many picks the Flyers have in this upcoming draft, let's say hypothetically, which I don't think will happen, but they take all six of those picks, right? The three firsts and the three seconds, right? I think there's a chance that a couple of those might get traded,
Yeah,
especially the later first or the
definitely, definitely.
one of the high seconds. But if they do, you're talking about injecting six top 40, top 50 players from
Yeah.
a strong draft into this prospect pool. Like you do that 1 year and this prospect pool is absolutely loaded with
For
players.
sure. But you know what
Um,
that tells me? And that shows me if they do that, that they're not either happy with some of the development of the guys that they might have right now, or they're going to look to move some of the guys in the pool
sure.
to try to parlay that if they're not going to move those picks, right? They might say, hey, let's not move the picks. Let's move some of the prospects we already have, and we'll add these new prospects into the pool and kind of like do almost like a role reversal in a
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, look, I can only say what I would do. If I was GM, my goal this upcoming draft would be to move up in the draft. I think we both agree with that.
I would, yeah,
I
100%
I
agree. I
would load
think
up.
you have the assets to do it, right? So why not take the opportunity here? Because you might not always have six picks in the first two rounds. Probably
Yeah,
never will again, to be honest.
right.
So
I would look to make sure like if the Flyers do finish, outside the top 10, but let's say they finish with the 10th pick in the draft, right? It's still a really good pick this year. You can still get a top prospect, but
yeah,
I would imagine our GM will try to do that. I will try to move up to the top three. I'll be like, I'll give you, you know, three first round picks to get that number two overall, the number three
yeah,
overall
that upper
player.
echelon guy that's gonna make an impact right away. Exactly.
Yeah, that's what the Flyers have set themselves up for. And if they're really good and they end up drafting at the bottom of the draft, hypothetically, right, they can still try to move up if they need to, or they can use those assets to get a young player. There's so many opportunities here, and I don't know. I was just like wasn't annoyed or anything when I saw this post, but I was kind of like, come on, man, you can't like look at some sites pyramid. Like Steve Dangle does these pyramid trees all the time. And I guarantee if you look at his pyramid trees, and he's very knowledgeable about Toronto Maple Leafs prospects and players, he's obsessed, just like us. He's obsessed with that team. I guarantee his pyramids don't mean absolutely anything today. Like they did not, like Matthew Nyes was not the end all be all for them. They didn't even like Easton Cowan when the pick was made.
Yep.
And look how they feel about it now. Like, give it time. I have a feeling we're going to look at Jet Luchenko by the end of this and be like, man, what a draft pick. It's what my gut tells me when
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
looking at
wait,
it.
like I said, with all these guys, right? 3 years at the minimum. Realistically, I would say 5 years because 3 years is usually when the guy will make his rookie debut. And you can't judge a career based off a rookie in a sophomore season. So you really can't judge drafts until 5 years out. Like that's the kind of
Yeah.
safe bet to look at. But I think there's a ton of guys to be excited about. Michkov being the leading man, obviously, and then Luchenko and Bonk to follow, but even Barkey, Siernik, Kolosov, Zavragin, Tuamala. I think there's a lot of guys to be excited about. And you can say whatever you will about the Flyers' past prospect pools being strong as well. But like we said, right, like you cannot let the past dictate your future. So you can't really say because it didn't work out in the past, it's not going to work out now. It's a completely new set of prospects, completely new development staff. I think that's the main thing to point out that it's a new development staff
Yeah.
kind of working with these players. So.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if Jet Luchenko, and I've been thinking a lot about this, like completely exceeds last year's productivity, and puts up 100 plus points in the OHL. Like that would not surprise me at all. Actually, my gut tells me that that's probably what he's gonna do. He's gonna be one of the top producers and best players in that league next year. I
Yep,
just
it's
have a
gonna be fun to
feeling.
watch with his speed for sure. We're gonna keep an
Yeah.
eye on it.
All right, that's the end of this show. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, I mean the season's ramping up, so like I've kind of been saying, there's gonna be articles coming out for me during September training camp, like player projections. So just keep an eye out for those player projection articles as we kind of go through and ramp up into training camp here.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe to the podcast. If you have listened this far and you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so now. It's the best way to support us. Also, hit the notification bell for notifications on when we release these episodes. You can be notified right away. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify for the audio versions. Follow us there as well, and give us a rating there if you can. We haven't gotten many ratings of late. But if you can go out there, especially give us like 5-star rating, that would be amazing. Truly, truly appreciate it. Also, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Also, shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. 215-752-0560. That's Public Summit Adjusters. And also shout out to Sports Spider. Again, they are an aggregator of sports content from all around every sport. Actually, they do every sport. You can go there and check out all of their content available, but they consolidate everything in one. They aggregate everything together. And we are posted at the top every time we release something new. So check out Sports Spider. Link is in the description. And again, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Vasili. Have a great, great vacation.
It's gonna be awesome, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you when you get back. And yeah, we love you guys. And remember, always stay cool.